I don't know if y'all saw this headline from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Now, this is my hometown newspaper. And I came across this. A friend of mine sent me this editorial. And it's from their editorial board. And the headline is, Coronavirus Moves to the Heartland, Where Some Issues Make It More Dangerous. Now, I read this piece, and I really wanted to be as generous as possible in terms of not immediately assigning the worst possible interpretation of what was said to the editorial board. But it's really difficult to do that, particularly when they kind of double down on it in defense. So I wrote about this at danalash.com, and they were attempting to tie the editorial board, punditry, conservative punditry in particular, to the threat of outbreaks in rural America. And they are very concerned, the editorial board says, about the health of rural Missourians because all they do is listen to conservative radio all day and watch Fox News when they're not in Walmart. And listen to this graph. Through March, less heavily populated areas, they write, mostly watched from the sidelines as their more urban neighbors wrestled with the crisis. Okay, I immediately have to stop because I'm just I've been reading stories about, I had a headline that I read, what was it, last week? Farms that had to euthanize chickens because they had so many eggs they didn't know what to do with. No one's buying chickens. No one's buying eggs. Everything is shut down. Dairy farmers are having to dump milk. There are all sorts of farms that are having to dump product. So the idea that because you don't understand what it is that rural America does, and so you think that they are watching from the sidelines, I guarantee you that they're not watching from the quote-unquote sidelines. They're literally in the middle of the field having to dump product and watching their livelihoods go down the drain with said product because everything has been shut down. So they continue and they say, well, it's tempting to assume that the virus would leave the rural areas alone. They thrive in crowds. They say complacency was fed by irresponsible rhetoric from voices popular in rural America, the Hannitys and Limbaughs and a certain incumbent president, dismissing the pandemic as an exaggeration or hoax. And it didn't help that rural state governors, including Missouri's Mike Parson, were generally slower to issue stay-at-home orders than their urban counterparts. So, as I said, the only complacency that I saw about the infection was Nancy Pelosi staging that February 24th photo op in Chinatown, telling everybody to come out and eat. And that was a month after the president's travel moratorium, for which he was probably called a racist and fascist, if you remember. And as someone, obviously, you're watching me, I work in talk radio. No one in my industry has ever downplayed any risks associated with the Wuhan coronavirus, and no one has ever called it a hoax. The president did not call the pandemic a hoax. He called, and I linked, by the way, the transcript if you're so interested, the fear-mongering from Democrats and false accusations about his response, specifically a hoax. It's much in the same way that tabloid writers now are trying to pull a hoax over on Americans by insisting that the president called this pandemic a hoax. And I don't believe that urban dwellers like the editorial board knows more about the impact of the pandemic on rural areas than the governor that was born and raised on a farm in rural Missouri. And it's lazy for the paper to suggest that pundits with whom they disagree are uninformed because of disagreement, simply because we ask about the discrepancy between various IMHE models, or we voice criticism of officials who exceed their authority and exploit a pandemic to expand their influence. And so they decided, the Springfield News Leader tried to defend them. They did the Amelia Bedelia tactic. They appealed to literality and said that, Mike Parson, when he had harsh words for the Post, he said that they referred to rural Missourians as simple-minded, but that descriptor wasn't found in the paper. So, and I finish with this, the suggestion that rural Missourians, and their sentence was literally rural residents should be heeding those warnings and not the seductive voices of the uninformed pundits, that wasn't meant to imply that rural Missourians rely only on talk radio and the president to inform them of their actions regarding the pandemic, because it literally does. This is why people don't trust media. A free press dishonors its heritage by treating the free people that it was designed to inform and protect as simple-minded peasants because of political differences. Shame on you.